Right, finally, it is time to break out the Supercharger. This thing has been sat in the garage for about a year now. I've not touched it, but today that changes because I've got a little bit of prep work to do to this thing to get it ready to go in the engine bay of the MX5. Let's get on with it. Right, so there's a few jobs that I want to get done today. The main one is to get the stock pulley off the Supercharger so I can fit my KAVS Reduction Pulley. Now this is basically a smaller pulley, 15% smaller to be exact, and this is going to make the Supercharger spin faster. Now there's a lot to gain from doing this. You'll get better low down torque, you'll get more boost at high RPM, but you have to be aware of the Supercharger's maximum safe RPM, because if you start to spin the thing too fast, reliability could become an issue down the line. And that's ultimately why I've gone with a 15% reduction, because it seemed to strike a nice balance between performance and reliability. Now the other thing you've got to be worried about when you do this mod is heat, because it stands to reason as you spin that charger faster, you compress more air, you generate more heat, and intake temps are going to go up, which is why you saw in the last episode I'm making way to fit an intercooler into the front of the MX5 to hopefully keep those intake temps in check. If you were just going to run a straight crossover pipe and not bother with an intercooler, which you can do if your budget is really tight, honestly, I think I'd just stick with the stock pulley. So that's enough about the reduction pulley. There are a few jobs, like I mentioned earlier, I need to do as well. The first one is to remove this bracket off the snout of the Supercharger, because that thing is going to foul the outlet. I need to change the oil in the snout of the Supercharger itself, and then finally I need to blank off this little opening on the backside of the Supercharger to stop any unfiltered air entering there. So I've started with potentially the most difficult part of this Supercharger prep, and that is removing the stock pulley. Now by all accounts these are extremely difficult to shift because it's an interference fit, meaning it is pressed on tightly on the Supercharger shaft from the factory, with basically no consideration to the poor guy further down the line that has to get it off, i.e. me. But I broke out my heavy duty bearing puller earlier this morning. I wasn't sure whether it would tackle it or not, so I got it hooked up and amazingly it shifted it. All credit to the thing. So now that pulley's removed, I can fit the KAVS Reduction Pulley, but before I do it I want to take care of a couple of the jobs I mentioned earlier, because access is better with the pulley removed. Right, so the next job I want to tackle is cutting the bracket off the snout of the Supercharger, but before I attempt it I've taped up the outlet of the Supercharger itself, and that's just to prevent any swarf or metal filings going in there while I hack away at it with the hacksaw. So I'm going to take it into the back of the garage, clamp it in the vise, and then just go at it with the hacksaw and try and keep as straight a line as possible. Okay, I've hacked that bracket off. It wasn't too difficult, it only took me about 10 minutes in the end. So now that's off, the next job I'm going to attempt is changing the oil in the snout of the Supercharger. Okay, to get the old oil out of this thing, I just need to remove this small bolt on the outer casing of the Supercharger, which requires an Allen key to undo, and then once I've removed that I can just simply invert the Supercharger to let all that old oil drain out. Right, I'm satisfied I've got most of that old oil out of there, so now I need to replace it with fresh oil. Now this oil is specific to these Eaton Superchargers, and this kit I got off eBay from Boost Tech, and it even came with a syringe as well to make my life as easy as possible. So I'm going to suck the oil up into the syringe. I've read the instructions. I need about 145 milliliters of oil to fill this thing, so it's going to take me 3 attempts of sucking up the oil and squirting it in there, and then when it's full I'm just going to replace that bolt and nip it up with the Allen key. Okay, we're making progress. I've got that little bracket hacked off. I've replaced the oil in the snout of the supercharger, so now I can get on with the main job of today, which is fitting the KAVS Reduction Pulley. Now this thing thankfully is not an interference fit. Instead, it's just a two-part pulley that clamps onto the shaft of the supercharger. So fitting this is a lot easier than removing the old one. So basically I'm going to slide this collar onto the shaft here, push it on as far as it will go, like that, and then I'm going to drop the pulley over the top of it and align the holes and then install the bolts. Now it does recommend using Loctite on these, so I'm going to put a small drop on each bolt and then get them installed and then nip them up with the Allen key. And that is all there is to it. That KAVS reduction pulley is now installed and ready for some boosted action. Okay, we're nearly finished with today's jobs because the last thing I need to do is blank off this hole at the rear of the supercharger. Now I imagine this was for a breather line or something like that on the Mini, but we don't need that for the MX5 and we don't want unfiltered air to be sucked through this. So to blank it off, I'm basically going to silicone an M8 bolt into the hole to seal it up. I have wrapped some insulation tape around the bolt to ensure it's a tight fit, and then I'm going to put a bit of silicone under the head of the bolt. I'm going to use this EB25 stuff, which I've used around the house. It's legit, it sticks really well. So I've got it on there, and then I'm just going to push the bolt into position, and once that's set, it shouldn't be going anywhere. So there we go, that's another bunch of jobs ticked off the list, and this supercharger is now one step closer to going in the engine bay of the MX5. Now obviously there's still a little bit more prep work to do to the thing before I can fit it, namely I need to fit the inlet and the outlet, but I'm still waiting on these parts from G19 Engineering, so I can't do that just yet. But what I can do before I go, as we do every episode, is do a quick budget update, because it has taken a hit in this episode. So the KAVS reduction pulley, that was £105 from Orange Performance, and the supercharger oil was £17 off Boost Tech on eBay, as I mentioned earlier. So with those two spends, the current total is now at £1,187. So there we go. If you want to stay up to date with this supercharged build, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Cheers, and I'll see you for the next episode.